West Virginia looks perfect from the outside. Mountains, rivers, green everywhere you look. But look a little closer and you'll find something else. Towns where thousands of people once built entire lives, then had to walk away from everything they owned. Here are 10 of those towns. Chances are you've never heard of a single one. In 1973, the last person living in Sioux packed up and left. No fire, no flood, nothing dramatic at all. The town just ran out of reasons to exist. And honestly, that's what makes this story hit different. Sioux was built in the late 1800s for one job: making coke. Never heard of it? Coke is coal that's been baked inside stone ovens until every impurity burns away. What's left is a super pure fuel, hot enough to melt iron into steel. Without coke, America's steel industry simply doesn't happen. Sioux was one of dozens of West Virginia towns built purely to feed that machine. Everything here revolved around the ovens and the mines. Company houses lined the hillside. Miners bought groceries, boots, and tools on credit at the company store, then paid it off on payday. When the shift ended, the hollow came back to life. Kids playing in the road, women in the gardens, men on the porch still smelling of coal smoke. It was hard, but it was full. Then, steel modernized. New methods made small operations like Sioux pointless overnight. Production slowed. The companies stopped investing. Families left, not all at once, but one by one, until the last family locked the door in 1973. Today, Sioux sits inside Babcock State Park. If you know where to look, the original coke ovens are still out there in the woods. Huge brick shells cracked open by decades of weather, trees growing straight up through the floors. Most hikers walk right past them and never know what they're looking at. There's no road into this town. The only way in is on foot, down more than 800 stairs carved straight into the wall of the new River Gorge. And at the bottom, machinery so massive and so intact, it barely looks abandoned. It looks paused. John Nuttall claimed this land along the New River in the early 1900s. The gorge walls were nearly straight up and down, so getting coal out took serious engineering. A giant iron tipple built right into the cliff, with a conveyor feeding coal straight onto waiting C&O railroad cars. When the rail line arrived in 1873, Nuttallburg turned into one of the busiest coal shipping operations in the whole gorge. Real families lived here. Miners came up from their shifts covered in coal dust, had supper with their kids, then went right back down the next morning. There was a company store, a school, and the kind of tight-knit community you only get when everyone's survival depends on the same thing. By 1958, the good coal seams were running out, and the railroad contracts that kept the whole place alive dried up too. The company shut it down. Families packed what they could carry and climbed those stairs one last time. The iron tipple is still standing. 40 coke ovens are still hiding in the brush. Old rail tracks vanish into the plants, and the safety warnings the company posted for its miners, gas ventilation rules, safety procedures, are still nailed to the walls, exactly where they were the day the last worker walked out. Nobody ever came back to take them down. 60 years later, they're still there. Long before Texas struck oil, long before Oklahoma, one of America's first oil booms happened in a small town tucked in the hills of West Virginia. For a while, that town believed it was about to become something huge. It wasn't. Volcano sits in Wood County, and in the mid-1800s, it was one of the earliest oil towns in the country. When the wells hit, money poured in fast. A hotel went up, a post office, restaurants, a meat market, a pumping station. Businessmen showed up, families settled down. Everyone had steady wages, and the whole town buzzed with the feeling that it was going somewhere. But the oil industry was already shifting toward bigger, richer fields in Pennsylvania. The real money was quietly following it there. Volcano's wells were still pumping, sure, but the companies with deep pockets were already pulling out. The town was losing ground before disaster even hit. Then, in January 1879, fire tore through the entire business district. Kennedy's restaurant? Gone. The Nikolai Hotel? Gone. The post office, the meat market, the pumping station, all gone. And since the oil companies were already halfway out the door, none of them saw a reason to rebuild a town they'd basically abandoned already. They packed up for good, and Volcano went silent. Today, all that's left is a small museum and gift shop marking the spot. For a town that was part of America's very first oil boom, a town that honestly deserved a highway marker and a chapter in the history books, that's all that remains. In 1910, this tiny town generated more railroad freight revenue than Cincinnati and Richmond combined. 2 banks, 2 hotels, a jewelry store, a movie theater, restaurants, and a poker game that reportedly ran non-stop for 14 straight years. Today, 5 people live there, and the reason it all collapsed will genuinely surprise you. Captain W.D. Thurmond was given 73 acres along the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway in 1873 as payment for survey work. When the C&O pushed its main line through the new River Gorge, that small patch of land turned into the central hub where coal trains from dozens of mines got assembled and shipped east. For a strip of land barely big enough to notice on a map, the money running through it was staggering. Thurmond had no roads for years. Rail was the only way in or out. The commercial buildings sat right up against the tracks with no street in between. Captain Thurmond banned alcohol on his land, so across the river, the Dun Glen Hotel had no such rule, and became famous for a poker table that reportedly never stopped running for 14 straight years. Here's what actually killed the town. Everything about Thurmond, the water towers, the coaling stations, the engine house, existed for one job: refueling steam locomotives. Steam engines needed to stop roughly every 100 miles for coal and water. Thurmond was that stop. When American railroads switched to diesel in the late 1940s and early 50s, trains could suddenly run hundreds of miles without stopping anywhere. Overnight, Thurmond had nothing left to offer. The hotels emptied out. The banks had no business. Families had no reason to stay. The National Park Service now owns most of the town. The old depot is a visitor center. Amtrak still stops 3 times a week, but fewer than 400 people get off the train each year. Only 5 people officially live there. Streets that once moved 95,000 passengers a day are now so quiet you can stand right in the middle and hear nothing but the river. Imagine a tiny Appalachian town with more millionaires per square mile than anywhere else in America. Sounds impossible, right? It happened, and what's left today isn't what you'd expect. At the turn of the 20th century, Bramwell had more millionaires per capita than any town in the entire country. Not the state, the country. It all started with coal. In the 1880s, the Pocahontas seam was discovered here, up to 10 feet thick, stretching 48 miles, and burning so cleanly it was marketed as smokeless coal. The Norfolk and Western Railroad made 14 stops a day in Bramwell, and the men running the mining operations built their mansions right here along the Bluestone River, while thousands of miners dug the seams a few miles away. What they built was unlike anything else in Appalachia: a 24-room mansion with a copper roof and an indoor swimming pool. A home built from brick imported straight from England. 17 millionaires, all living within walking distance of each other. The Bank of Bramwell held so much cash that its janitor's actual job was wheeling a wheelbarrow of money down the street to the train depot. That same bank sold more World War I war bonds than any other bank in America. Then, October 1929 hit. The stock market crash wiped out most of those fortunes within a few years. The bank collapsed. The Depression crushed coal demand. The railroad pulled back. Whoever hadn't already left lost whatever they had. The dinner parties, the visitors from New York, the ballrooms, all of it stopped, and it never came back. What makes Bramwell different from everything else on this list is that the mansions are still standing. The whole town made the National Register of Historic Places back in 1984. The brick streets are still there. You can literally walk up and look at what coal money built with your own eyes. Fewer than 300 people live there now, and the bank's been gone for almost a century. But the houses are still up on that hillside, and when you see them without knowing the backstory, they're honestly hard to believe. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from. One afternoon in May 1920, a group of men finished a job in a small West Virginia river town and started walking toward the train station to leave. They never made it. 10 of them were dead within 2 minutes. What happened in that short window sent shockwaves through American history that are still felt today. Matewan sat along the Tug Fork River in Mingo County, right on the Kentucky border. A main street, a depot, a church, families, coal wages holding the whole town together. On the surface, it looked like any other small Appalachian town. What set it apart was its police chief. In 1920, the United Mine Workers of America was pushing hard to unionize the non-union coal fields of southern West Virginia. Miners who signed union cards knew exactly what they were risking: their jobs, their company-owned homes, maybe even their safety. The Stone Mountain Coal Company hired the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency to shut that down. These weren't regular law enforcement. They were hired enforcers, and their job was to keep miners in line. On May 19th, 13 Baldwin Felts agents showed up in Matewan to throw mining families out of company housing. Women and children were forced into the street at gunpoint, their belongings dumped in the road. When the agents finished and headed for the evening train, Police Chief Sid Hatfield stepped right in front of them. Armed miners had already quietly surrounded the block. Within 2 minutes, everything exploded. 10 men were dead, 7 detectives, 2 miners, and Matewan's own mayor. What followed became the largest armed labor uprising in American history. The next year, thousands of miners marched armed in the Battle of Blair Mountain. Coal companies never fully regained their grip on southern West Virginia's coal fields again. And the labor rights that came out of this, the right to organize, fair pay, workplace safety, are rights workers across America still hold today. Matewan is nearly empty now. The old depot is a museum. A flood wall along the Tug Fork is covered in murals telling the whole story. The building that once served as Baldwin Felts headquarters still stands on Main Street, bullet holes still in the walls, right where they've been for over 100 years. You have to walk down 821 stairs into the new River Gorge just to reach this place. Most people in West Virginia have never even heard of it. And once you're down there, it doesn't feel like a ghost town. It feels like everyone just walked off the job one day and never came back. Kmore opened in 1899. Between 1900 and 1962, miners hauled more than 16 million tons of coal out of that one mountain. Every single ton dug by men who lived with their families in company houses right above the mine. Their kids went to the company school. Their families went to the company church. And every morning, those men went back underground, knowing full well a roof collapse or a gas pocket could end everything without warning. They went anyway, because there was a family waiting for supper. In 1960, a bad fire tore through the town. The site was too remote and too damaged to bother rebuilding. The company shut the mine down 2 years later, and families who'd lived in that gorge for generations had no choice but to leave. The forest has been swallowing the site ever since. Machinery sits exactly where it stopped running. Buildings lean a little further every year. And the safety notices posted for the miners, gas warnings, ventilation rules, emergency steps, are still pinned right where they were on the last day this place ran. Walking through Kmore, those old signs hit you differently. They were written for men who are long gone, and they've been hanging in the silence ever since. Maybe you've seen the movie. Maybe you've read the book. But most people who love the story of Homer Hickam have no idea what Coalwood actually looks like today. And once you know, it changes how the whole story lands. George Lafayette Carter rode into McDowell County on the back of a mule in 1905. He found rich coal seams in the mountain and bought 20,000 acres on the spot. He built a mine, then built an entire town around it. Company houses, a church, a school, a store, even a full-time company doctor and dentist. At its peak, over 2,000 people called Coalwood home, and McDowell County became the single highest coal-producing county in the entire United States. Life here revolved completely around the mine tipple. Kids grew up in its shadow. Miners who'd worked those tunnels for 30 years knew every passage by feel alone. Nobody thought the mountain was going anywhere, and most families assumed neither were they. Then, in the fall of 1957, the mine superintendent's 14-year-old son looked up and watched Sputnik cross the night sky, and decided he was going to build rockets. Right there, in a coal town in McDowell County, Homer Hickam and a small group of friends started launching homemade rockets off a barren coal dump they nicknamed Cape Coalwood. They failed again and again before they finally got it right. In 1960, they won the National Science Fair. Homer went on to become a NASA engineer, and years later wrote the memoir that became the movie October Sky. A coal miner's son from one of the poorest counties in America made it to the space program, and that story outlived the town that raised him. The mine shut down for good in 1986. By 1990, the population had dropped below 900. Today, the tipple is gone. The company store is barely recognizable. The houses are slowly disappearing back into the hillside, one at a time. The town that launched a boy toward NASA is quietly being reclaimed by the mountain. And most people who love that movie have no idea the real place has nearly vanished. When U.S. Steel showed up in McDowell County in 1902, they didn't just build a coal operation. They built an entire world. 12 towns, 15,000 people, schools, churches, a golf course, a bowling alley, a movie theater, a country club. 80 years later, they shut the whole thing down in under 12 months and walked away. Gary, West Virginia was the crown jewel of U.S. Steel's Appalachian coal empire. The company bought over 50,000 acres along the Tug Fork River and built 12 connected company towns, all linked by paved roads and rail spurs. It was named after Elbert Henry Gary, U.S. Steel's founding chairman, the same man Gary, Indiana is named after. At its peak in the 1940s, Gary Hollow held nearly 15,000 people, 27 churches, 10 company stores, 9 elementary schools, 2 high schools, a bowling alley, a dairy, a bakery, a pool hall, a country club, and a golf course. In the workforce was one of the most genuinely diverse in the whole region. Miners from Hungary, Romania, Italy, Poland, and from across the American South. Black and white workers living side by side. And by the 1950s, sending their kids to the same schools. In 1923, the U.S. Coal Commission scored Gary a 90 out of 100 for cleanliness, safety, and community life, and called it a model for how a company town should be run. Then the coal ran out. By the 1970s, the richest seams, the ones that made Gary worth building in the first place, were mostly gone. In March 1982, U.S. Steel laid off 500 miners in a single month. By December, every mine the company ran in Gary was closed for good. By March 1983, unemployment in Gary hit 90%, the highest ever recorded anywhere in the United States at the time, not just in West Virginia. By 1990, only 180 mining jobs remained where thousands once worked. Today, the population across all 12 former towns is under 800. The old company office sits dark on the hillside. The satellite towns are being reclaimed by forest. The golf course is still open, now called the McDowell Country Club. 15,000 people had real lives here. Faith, family, and community built across generations. And when the coal ran out, so did the company, and it never looked back. There's a building in Fayette County that most people in this state have never seen. It's enormous, it's crumbling, and once you understand what it was actually built to do, from the main floor all the way down to the basement, it'll stick with you in a way you won't expect. The Whipple Company store went up in 1890. From the outside, it looks like a large commercial building, but it was never just a store. It was a complete economic control system, every piece of daily life in a coal mining community squeezed into one building, engineered to make sure every dollar a miner earned went straight back to the company. On the main floor, families bought food, clothing, medicine, tools, and furniture, but not with cash. Wages came in scrip, currency the company printed itself, only spendable at that same store. You worked the mine, you got tokens, and those tokens were worthless anywhere else on Earth. No other store, no alternative, no way out of the system. The company decided what your labor was worth, then made sure every cent came right back to them. One floor up, a company doctor kept office hours, his fee deducted straight from wages before a miner ever saw them. And down in the basement, a mortuary. When a miner was killed underground, and men were killed underground constantly, the same building that employed him, paid him in tokens, and sold him his groceries was also where his body was prepared for burial. From your very first day at the mine to the day your family carried you out, Whipple was there for every part of it. Families here understood exactly what they'd signed up for. Men went underground every day, fully aware of the risk. Women ran a household on whatever scrip was left after the company took its cut. Kids grew up inside a system built so that money never truly left the company's hands. This was the coal camp economy at its most brutally honest, and Whipple was its address. When coal demand collapsed in the mid-1900s, the store closed with it. The town emptied out. The building was left exactly as it stood, shelves bare, floors softening, the basement doors shut. It's still standing today. People still make the drive specifically to see it, and when they stand in front of it, knowing what happened inside, they feel something hard to put into words. The weight of generation after generation who fed their families through that main floor, and whose husbands and fathers came out through that basement. No other single building in West Virginia holds more of what coal country life actually was. That's why it's number one.